Ayy, look, yeah, ayy. I'm in the lab like Dexter, brand new batch he tested. I'm with all the extras, don't try and bitch, I'm pressure. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers.
With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. We'll go ahead and discuss the very first game that kicked off the 2024 NBA play-in tournament between the two teams. The Los Angeles Lakers went on the road to play the New Orleans Pelicans, and they were able to win this game 110 to 106. Despite Zion Williamson giving the New Orleans Pelicans 40 points, he had to leave the game a little bit early. But other than that, Lakers had this game sealed away at one point with the 18-point lead. So let's go ahead and recap and get this game a little bit.
I mean, like we kind of knew coming in, based on the previous matchups that this was going to be a tough matchup for the Pelicans. I mean, all year playing tournament, and then the matchup a couple of days before this, this playing game, we kind of knew the Lakers play the Pelicans just as well as anybody can in the league, and it was on display in this game at times. They did a hell of a job, on their other players. CJ McCollum, he's a guy that I'll get to in a bit in the second playing game that we'll discuss, but he wasn't able to get to his spots. And Brandon Ingram, I guess he was come back from a minutes restriction, but he was struggling as well. But the guy really that I want to highlight that proved everybody wrong, a guy that's been under heavy criticism all year long, throughout his career. I mean, Zion Williamson put on a hell of a performance. I mean, just flat out. I mean, Anthony Davis is an unbelievable defensive player, and even he looked mortal against Zion Williamson. No answers for him at all. He was going right at AD every single time. The Lakers have a bunch of strong defenders. I mean, Rui is pretty strong. LeBron is very strong, as we know, and AD is a defensive player of the year type of player. And they had no answers for Zion. In the second half, they basically just said, "Yo, let's give the ball to Zion," while CJ and Brandon Ingram were on the bench, and he willed them back into the game. And unfortunately, he got injured during that stretch, and the Lakers hit a bunch of big shots. Austin Reeves hit a shot, D'Lo hit a shot, and they basically put the game away. And I mean, for the Pelicans, I mean, it sucks losing a guy in Zion who wanted to prove himself so bad. He was on a low leverage type of production this year. Taking his time, he wasn't putting in a lot of effort. This year trying to keep himself low maintenance, and sucks for him to get injured. But for the Lakers, you get your rematch against Denver. I don't know if that's something you'd be excited about, but if you're ever going to get them now, you might as well just get them at this point when you're the freshest and you're healthiest. So it's going to be a good matchup.
Bring me that Serbian. Man. I wasn't happy with the Lakers' results. Although we got the W, I felt like, we couldn't put a body on Zion. He was just manhandling us that whole second half until that injury. And I feel like, that's kind of tough, him going for 40, and we're almost losing to a guy with, Brandon Ingram on minute restriction, CJ McCollum playing horrible, and a couple of the other guys not showing up. Wasn't too happy with the results. We came up big in the end. D'Lo made a big shot. Reeves made a big shot, but LeBron and AD, their play has to be better, especially coming up against the Nuggets. But, to speak about CJ McCollum, this guy calling out, Zion Williams last year in the playoffs, talking about we need people, ready. We need people committed. We need people in shape. We need people to watch their diet. We need people to watch what they're doing outside. And for him to just pull up and not perform, and just have a horrible outing in this game, especially when he needed to step up and contribute a lot, and he didn't. So for him, he talked that talk, but he didn't walk that walk. So I think this offseason for the Pelicans, man, I think they probably get rid of CJ McCollum, but we got a big showdown with the Nuggets coming up, and I can't wait for that.
Yeah, for me, not much for me to take away from this game besides Zion Williamson performing and going out there and dominating as I expected. Even when Zion had all his haters talking about him being overweight and him never being available, and him going to restaurants and they know him on a first name basis, knowing the cooks and the chefs' names and being able to eat the table and things like that. All those guys, all those critics are just being a little bit too harsh on a guy that's only been in the league for about 4 or 5 years now. And I knew he was going to come into this game and ball, and I knew this game was going to be a tough matchup for the Pelicans regardless, just because excluding the game that they played on this past Sunday, just in general, overall, it's always been a tough matchup for this Pelicans team against the Lakers, just because they build a wall against Zion, and it's kind of tough when there's no spacing and you pair Zion with Jonas Valanciunas. Zion's only going to be a guy. He's looking to just get downhill and get to the basket, and Jonas Valanciunas he can't really space the floor out too well, and so they try to work with it as best as they can, but they found a lot of success in that second half. Without the efforts of CJ McCollum, who's legit dog shit, and we'll get to him in the next game, and Brandon Ingram being under minutes restriction. I feel like if Bi himself just wasn't on the minutes restriction, this game probably could have been a little bit different. Probably could have swung in favor of the New Orleans Pelicans. But all the credit in the world to the Lakers. They did what they could. They did their job. Even though blowing an 18-point lead is a bit unacceptable at this stage in the season, I feel like they were able, with them just being able to withstand the Pelicans run. It gives them an opportunity to learn from this experience, and gear themselves up for a matchup that maybe that they've been looking forward to all season long. Anthony Davis in the beginning of the season and training camp was saying how they were excited to play these guys again, and they ended up getting swept in the regular season by this team. And we'll get to that matchup in a bit, but overall it was a good win for the Los Angeles Lakers, and they were able to clinch the 7th seed in the Western Conference. And they got a date with the Denver Nuggets on Saturday. But now we'll go ahead and move on to the next game. The Golden State Warriors.
I'm gonna say it again. Bring me that Serbian, man. We got some beef.
You're not ready for him, man.
Bring me that Serbian.
But the Golden State Warriors finished out the season as the 10th seed, and they had a matchup with the Sacramento Kings, who finished as the 9th seed, and they had to go on the road in this game in Sacramento, and the Sacramento Kings pretty much blew these guys off the floor with a score of 118-94. This may be the last game we see from the big three that kickstarted this dynasty: Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. But besides all of that, let's go ahead and get our thoughts about this game.
I mean, this game just kind of summed, all the issues that the Warriors were facing all year long into one game. It was basically everything that could have happened or what we were anticipating happened in this game. I mean, they didn't all game long. I mean, the Sacramento Kings did a great job of just blitzing and trapping Steph, who at this point he's a little bit older. He's not like Steph from 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where he can absolutely carry an offense. So he does need support in a real secondary option, or at least giving him somebody that can be on equal paring, or give him somebody that he needs to play off of. When you go and you look at the stat sheet, I mean, Klay Thompson he's just washed at this point. And the worst part about it is Klay Thompson's acceptance of his role. If Klay Thompson were to accept the fact that, he's not that type of player anymore, and he'd be more willing in a bench role, like maybe that'd help the team more. Andrew Wiggins just has not been able to find his rhythm all year long. He's been dealing with some issues, and the rest of the team just it's a flawed roster. A lot of people will say, well, why doesn't Steve Kerr give this guy minutes or give this guy minutes? I think at the end of the day, it wouldn't have made a difference. You give Trace Jackson Davis minutes, it wouldn't have changed how flawed this roster is. You give Moses Moody minutes early on in the year, it really wouldn't have changed much about how this team is functionally built. I think it's just a flawed roster. It's aged. That 2 timeline thing really did hurt them at the end of the day, because you go back to that 2020. Had they picked a guy like Halliburton, had they picked a guy like LaMelo, maybe things would have been different for them. Even if they picked someone else outside of those two, anybody but Wiseman, things could have been different. But now, you ended up trading Jordan Poole, who I don't really rate that much, but you traded him for an older CP3, who was trying to give you bench production, but isn't going to be much for you in these type of games. It just summarizes what went wrong for this Warriors team. It probably looks like the end of the dynasty for them. And, if it is, then it was a hell of a dynasty for them. You ended up winning 4 rings, but, at what cost? You could have maybe extended it a year possibly, but it is what it is at this point. And for the Kings, I mean, Keegan Murray, last year, there's a lot of criticism about him not showing up early on in that first round matchup. And in this game, he showed up big time. Keon Ellis, another low-key guy for the Kings. So it was a great performance all around for them. But for the Warriors, I mean, just summarizes everything that went wrong for them.
Yeah. All year long, we knew the struggles that they had offensively, and it just showed in this game. Steph Curry can do so much for the team himself, so much for everybody else, and that if you really don't have that second scoring option, it's going to be tough. Klay Thompson, 0 for 10. Andrew Wiggins not really, showing up. Chris Paul, Podesky, those guys not really helping off the bench much. It's like, where are you going to get your offense in the second? Like, who's your second option? Who's really going to help you, step up and, score? Sometimes at some point last year or the year before when they went to the finals, it was Jordan Poole for them, coming off the bench. He, being that scoring plug. But right now, Klay Thompson washed. That brother is washed, and he hasn't accepted that role. Wiggins, he's fallen off. He's been dealing with a lot of stuff outside of basketball. He's been in and out of the lineup. He's been missing games and stuff like that. And there's no who else is going to contribute and step up for them. So I feel like they kind of set themselves up, on this timeline down this path. A couple years ago when them taking Wiseman as that second pick overall. So for me, that dynasty was probably, it's probably done. One or two of these guys are probably going to be gone. Most likely Klay Thompson's going to be gone. But, for the Kings, it was a big win for them. They lost to them last year in the playoffs, and Keegan Murray stepped up big, 8 for 13 from 3. And, a guy like Keon Ellis coming off the not coming off the bench, but started, play phenomenal, play fantastic. So, these guys are missing Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, couple key guys on their team, and they showed up and they won. So on to the next for them. And the Warriors, man, they got a lot to talk about this offseason. They got a lot to do.
Coming into this game, there was literally not much for me to expect from this Golden State Warriors team, because pretty much I knew how the outcome of the game was gonna turn out. Just because number one, the Sacramento Kings were coming into this game with vengeance. They wanted to avenge themselves from that Game 7 loss where Steph Curry dropped 50 points on them on their home floor. That left this very sour taste in their mouths, and they had a very good opportunity to send them home in a playing game, just a winner go home type game. And the Sacramento Kings, they stepped up to the plate. Like you guys mentioned, Keegan Murray stepped up. De'Aaron Fox had himself a solid game. Domantas Sabonis had himself close to a triple double, 16, 11, and 7. But the Kings came in and they did what they were supposed to do. Playing with hunger. They're the more aggressive team. They shot the ball a lot better than the Warriors. And for the Warriors, the writing has been on the wall the entire season. Even at some point during the season when they started to win more games and they started to go on in the last 10 games, maybe they were 7-3. And when you really take a look at those matchups, they weren't playing any good teams, but defensively they have gone better as a team. But at the end of the day, you can't necessarily just expect things to flip, or the switch to flip during the postseason. Just because it's worked for you guys in the past, it doesn't mean that it's always going to work. And that's pretty much what they were relying on heavily. Obviously, with their leader Steph Curry, leading the way offensively, and then getting contributions from guys like Klay Thompson and a lot of these other guys that they run with, like Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga. But not this time around. And for Steph Curry to have an off game and still shoot 50% from the field and finish the game with 22 points, the rest of the starters combined for only 24 points, and one of those guys had 0 points in 32 minutes. And so, a lot of that is just very unacceptable. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like if you ask any non-Warriors fan that's been paying attention to basketball this entire season, they will tell you that they're not surprised in the slightest. Klay Thompson has been a guy that's been inconsistent this entire season. Got a guy that's was a starter to begin the season, got put to the bench for pods, and then ended up having to come back into the rotation again. Draymond Green, a guy that dealt with his suspensions his entire season. And then you also have to go back to a lot of those games that were very close and winnable for the Warriors that put him in this position today. They weren't supposed to be the 9th seed. If you look back at a lot of those close games where either they had a lead and they choked it away, or they were supposed to win and just some guys hit some tough contested shots like game winners and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to taking care of business in the regular season. And for the Warriors, they just didn't do that this year. And even though they finished 10 games above 500, and which should land you a better seeding position, but the Western Conference is very stacked, and so they go into this offseason with a lot of questions. I'm not too sure how this roster is going to look next year, and I don't necessarily know what the plan is for these guys, just based on the fact that Klay Thompson is a guy that you probably don't want to bring back. Chris Paul, I believe, has one more year on this contract. What are you going to do with Andrew Wiggins' contract? There's just a lot of question marks for this team. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. Steph Curry told Draymond Green that we'll be back, but what does that mean? What does that look like for this Golden State Warriors team? And so, I think the dynasty has run its course. Each and every day I think about how they were able to squeeze out one more championship with that 2022 roster. But, at this point, it is what it is for the Golden State Warriors, and all the credit to the world to the Sacramento Kings for coming out and ending, any hope that they had for making the postseason as an 8th seed and competing in the first round versus the number 1 seed, the Oklahoma City Thunder. But overall, aside from all of that, we go ahead and move on to our next game. The very first game that we had on Wednesday that kicked off the play-in tournament for that day. The Miami Heat going on the road to play the 76ers. And this game, the 76ers were able to win 105-104. This game was very close throughout. The Miami Heat also had control of this game for most of it. But in that fourth quarter, they weren't able to secure the win. So let's go ahead and get our thoughts about this.
I mean, yeah, like I think Coach Spo played an unbelievable game. He coached masterclass of a game. It was a match between him and Nick Nurse. I think that zone was really causing Philadelphia issues like all game long. You know, Joel Embiid was struggling trying to break down the zone. The entire Sixers roster was struggling how to break down the zone, and it was causing him and Tyrese Maxey issues on where to pick their spots, and they were being a bit passive, and it was just a lot of confusion, which made no sense to me considering Philadelphia knew that Miami was going to play a zone entering this matchup, and it was going to be what they're going into. But then you go into that third quarter, and you know Nicholas Batum absolutely showed up with those 3 threes in the third quarter, and the fourth quarter, him and Buddy Hield really showed up, and then later on in the game, that's when Joel Embiid really got involved. You know, he started figuring out where to beat the zone at and started making some clutch plays, and Kelly Oubre chipped in, and you know Tobias Harris being benched in those last because then they had a lineup of guys that were actually contributing. Batum, Hield, Oubre, Maxey, and Embiid. I mean, the entire lineup was full of guys that knew exactly where to be. And, you know, all credit to Philadelphia for breaking down that zone because it was a defensive battle all game long. And, you know, they were able to squeeze out, you know, late after being down by almost 14 later on in that third quarter. And then for, you know, Miami, I mean, you know, it sucks to see Jimmy get hurt, like on a fast break layup, you know, especially Kelly Oubre when he was jumping on him on a pump fake. I mean, you never want to see Jimmy get hurt. You at least want to see this Heat team get a chance come in the playoffs. And you know, it's kind of what I was preaching about all year long about taking the regular season, you know, important. You know, it is a team that we've been ravished by injuries, but at the same time, you know, if you take the regular season, you know, serious, you win a couple more games, you win 3 more games or 2 more games, whatever it may be, you end up playing against, you know, the Bucks without Giannis. You know, you give yourself a chance to play a team like that, but instead, you know, you go through the gauntlet, and then you have to go through the entire play-in process, and you know, obviously injuries you can never predict, but you don't even get in this predicament. You at least give yourself a chance in the playoffs. So you know it sucks, but you know what can you do? I am excited to see how Coach Spo, you know, coaches a game against Boston and how it looks like. You know, he's going to be scratching his head, you know, multiple ways, but it's not. I don't have much hope for that series, if at all, in the beginning. So, and we'll get to that in a bit.
Fourth quarter yelling, why the fuck Batum, man? Man, that fourth quarter by Batum, man, he went crazy. I ain't gonna lie. That whole second half, he showed up. Man, I thought, you know, Spoelstra came out with that zone defense. It was working for some time, but man, look, those guys turned it up fourth quarter, man. Shout out to Batum, but Embiid, you know, he had a nice solid fourth quarter. Y'all kept him in check for most of the game. You know, that zone was specific just for, you know, to play against him and to put 2 bodies on him and Maxey and just to, you know, have everybody else beat you. And that's what essentially happened most of the game. You know, you guys had Batum beat you guys, and it is what it is. You know, I feel like Jimmy Butler could have played better, but that MCL injury, you know, him playing on that messed up knee was pretty tough. And Tyler Hero, I feel like, you know, he could have shot better as well, but 9 for 27, you know, a couple key guys missing in Duncan Robinson and Rozier. I feel like you guys are undermanned, but at the same time, I think you guys bounce back. We'll see what happens, but you know, good win for the Sixers. I think they needed to get away from you guys. I think they got a good chance against the Knicks, so we'll see what happens.
I definitely agree with that. I do think the Sixers have put themselves in a position to potentially, you know, make the second round with the matchup against a Julius Randle-less New York Knicks team, a team that relies heavily on Jalen Brunson. But before we get to all of that, man, you know, this game, watched a little bit of it, and that zone, you know, we're going to be talking about that, you know, for this game. You know, that zone was working. You know, anytime you can get a guy like Joel Embiid to shoot the ball 6 for 17 and you hold him to 23 points and 15 rebounds and 5 assists, you know, I feel like any team's going to have a lot of, you know, any team's going to have a good chance at winning that game, you know, because Joel Embiid is a guy that's going to go, he can go out and go ahead and give you 40, you know, and give you 35 plus along with those 15 boards. And so, you know, getting key contributions, a guy like Nick Batum going 7 for 12, 6 for 10 from the 3-point line, those are the type of players that could potentially hurt you. Those are the ones that you probably think you look back on like, like, damn, how did we let this guy get his game off against us? But for the Miami Heat, I think everything just kind of went downhill pretty much when Jimmy Butler got injured, even though they did have a lead, later on in the game after he got injured. But it's just kind of tough, man. You keep playing into like pretty much 40 minutes with a sprained MCL. It's just, it's tough to, be able to compete and go out there and do, play your game and do what you're, accustomed to doing. Tyler Hero, I'm not too sure what the excuse is for him, man, but it's unacceptable to go out there and shoot 9 for 27 from the field and 4 for 14, and outside of that, nobody really contributed on this team besides, Jaime off the bench with 22 minutes, 15 points. I feel like this was a great opportunity for the Miami Heat, to secure that 7th seed. But at the end of the day, without guys like Duncan Robinson, without guys like Terry Rozier, and a very hobbled Jimmy Butler, at some point you just kind of have to ask yourself, what are you capable of doing out there on the floor? They still gave themselves another. They did end up having another opportunity against the Chicago Bulls that we'll get to in a little bit, but. Overall for the Philadelphia 76ers, man, and we'll talk about their matchup in a bit, but they're looking pretty good and very solid. Tobias Harris, I know he's going to have to play better. Kyle Lowry's going to have to play better. Max is going to have to play better. They're going to also have to get some contributions from Kelly Oubre if they want to end up, going far in the playoffs. But overall, they did just what they could, just what they needed to do in order to get by in this game. It was pretty much a close one all the way throughout, and it was a good game overall. But now we go ahead and move on to the very next game. The Chicago Bulls and the Atlanta Hawks, two teams that finished in 9th and 10th place. And the Chicago Bulls were able to win this game and smoke the Atlanta Hawks off the floor with good efforts from Kobe White's 40-piece with a score of 131 to 116. So let's go ahead and recap this.
I mean, this was probably the least interesting game of the first 2 days of the playing tournament, definitely for me. But, it's just performance from Kobe White and just kind of summarize the type of season that he's been having and why, to me, he's deserving of the most improved player award because, it felt like at any single time he was just getting to his spot, just unbelievable footwork. I mean, it didn't matter what he was trying to do. He was just going to get to his spot and score. They really couldn't find an answer for him. And on the flip side, I mean, I know he was battling back from injuries, but it was just a poor performance from Trae Young. And I don't think this is the end of him in Atlanta, but, there's some rumblings about him, not being there anymore or him trying to figure out that he's not a number one option and that he's willing to play with other players. But it just kind of just summarizes both these teams to me are in some sort of purgatory, with the Bulls being more of a purgatory considering the Atlanta Hawks, at least they have Trae Young and he's relatively young. The Bulls, with DeRozan and Levine and Vucevic and those contracts. But, overall, it is a good nice sight to get your guys some reps. Guys like Ayu Dosunmu and Kobe White get them reps in this type of game, and it was an overall good win for the Chicago Bulls. So
great run for the Bulls, man. They came out. Kobe White, man. Shout out to him. He came out shooting some shit. He really came out hoop. Dropping that 40 ball and contributing from DeRozan, Vucevic, and other guys like that. They played and performed well. But to speak about Trae Young, man, I think his time is actually done. I really do believe he's out of Atlanta next year. I really do believe he's done with them. I don't think he's gonna stay there anymore. I don't think that duo of him, DeJounte Murray, him with Bogdanovich as well. They got a small team over there, and I don't think that has worked out well for him the last 6 or 7 years. So I think he's gonna axe out. I think he's gonna move on to a different team, and I think Atlanta, they go on a full rebuild. I think they're gonna try to get a lot for him, see what happens. But good win for the Bulls, good win for Kobe White and them, and we'll see what happens next playing game.
Overall, when I think about the Atlanta Hawks, man, they've a team that was in the Eastern Conference Finals roughly about 4 years ago against the Milwaukee Bucks. To see where they are today, it's just crazy to me. You would think a team that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals would want to build off that. They would try to add on to that, add pieces to this team, add complementary pieces alongside guys like Trae Young. And they tried it. They tried it by bringing in DeJounte Murray. But outside of that, I don't think the Atlanta Hawks front office has done a good job at, building a roster that's good enough to compete in the Eastern Conference. And the Eastern Conference isn't necessarily crazy competitive and crazy tough. If you have a good roster, everybody will know in the Eastern Conference that your record and your standing position it'll show that you have a good roster. But for the Atlanta Hawks, I mean, ever since they made the Eastern Conference Finals, they've been back in the play-in tournament each and every single time. And at some point, I can see why Trae Young went back to the media today and said, I'm not too sure, what the plan is, but I just want to win because that's just the type of player he is. And also the Atlanta Hawks haven't done a good job at surrounding him with, pieces to compete. And so, I do agree with you, Big H. I do think that his time in Atlanta might be done. I'm not too sure if that's a smart way to go about it. But I think they might just want to continue with DeJounte Murray being their starting point guard. But they'll be able to get a lot of assets and a lot of draft capital in return for a guy like Trae Young. But for the Chicago Bulls, they've been this confusing team this entire season. But Kobe White has been the consistent part for this whole season for this Bulls team. Coming out and dropping 42 points, I wasn't necessarily too surprised because the defense that the Atlanta Hawks were playing just wasn't great. So he was able to pick his spots and he was able to knock down some shots. And they're also the reason why they were able to blow these guys off the floor. Because they were able to get contributions from Nikola Vucevic. They were able to get a contribution from DeMar DeRozan, and it wasn't necessarily nothing too crazy. 24 points, 22 points. Ayo Dosunmu even chipped in with 19 points, and a lot of this game was played without Alex Caruso. He got knocked out of the game with the ankle injury, and so it's just like for the Atlanta Hawks, the Bulls' best perimeter defender wasn't out there on the floor for majority of the game, and you guys weren't able to contribute or not. You guys weren't able to get your game off. It's just like. What are you guys doing at that point? So a good win for the Chicago Bulls. They earned themselves a matchup tonight against the Miami Heat that we'll get to next. But, we'll go ahead and just jump right into that as well. Today, the Chicago Bulls went up against the Miami Heat without Jimmy Butler in Miami. And the Miami Heat they took control of this game from start to finish. And they were able to win this game 112-91.
Yeah, I mean, it was just over that third quarter is where the game just completely, blew up. I think Tyler Hero, he kind of had the performance Heat fans were all waiting for. Jaime Jaquez got busy really early, and just overall, I think everybody kind of chipped in this type of game. And Kobe White was really struggling. I think everybody did a hell of a job defensively, and that's kind of a mark of a great coach that even if you're missing your best player, or even if you're missing your players, like kind of reminding me of the Heat game, when Bam got in foul trouble. Even then, the zone was still causing issues for the Sixers. And in this game, you're missing your guy in Jimmy Butler, who plays almost like a free safety in this type of zone. Is still able to give Chicago Bulls some issues. And there's some tough decisions coming up for the Bulls. What does their future really look like? They have multiple guys on this roster that I don't think fit their timeline, and it just feels like they're in just a terrible place of purgatory where they're not even remotely close to good enough to compete, but they're not that bad where to the point where it's tanking mode. So, it's going to send, a lot of discussions going on over the summer for them versus on what they need to do. And I think it starts with getting rid of a guy like Vucevic. I just don't think, he's good enough regardless of the situation to keep on this roster and, moving from there.
Yeah, great win by Miami Heat and the young ones. No Jimmy Butler tonight, and they came out performed in hoop. Tyler Hero, he had a great game. Jaime had a great game. Duncan Robinson came back, he contributed. Cody Martin Caleb Martin had a great game as well, and that's what they needed. All around team effort to come back and win. So great win for them, and then Chicago. I think it's really time to blow it up. I thought it was time to blow it up last year, with DeRozan and what's his face still playing on that team. I think it's time for them to really blow it up and see what they can get in the market for DeRozan, Vucevic, and Levine. And see what how they can rebuild around Kobe White and a couple of the other guys. But Miami, they needed this. They facing Boston. Abdi, what's the update on the Jimmy Butler, man?
I think
he's not going to be able to make it.
He's not playing.
It's going to be tough against Boston, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, this has pretty much been the story of the Chicago Bulls season. Coming off a very emotionally high win at home against the Atlanta Hawks, and you had everything going for you in that game, and then all of a sudden you got to go on the road in a tough Miami environment, and then you aren't able to crack 100 points. And Kobe White didn't have himself a good game, but you can't always be perfect. You're gonna need some contributions. You're gonna need some DeMar DeRozan heroics. They weren't able to get that tonight. But all the credit in the world to the Miami Heat, man. Eric Spoelstra, game planning for the Chicago Bulls team without his star player and Jimmy Butler, and everybody contributed from top to bottom on this team. So Jaime Jaquez stepping into a starter position role, playing 35 minutes, dropping 21 points. It was only his first year out here as a rookie, doing his thing. And so, that's just what the Heat culture is all about, just the next man up mentality. And even when, you don't have your best guys out there, you're still able to go out there and compete and give 100% effort. And that was pretty much all the difference in the world in tonight's game. And so for the Miami Heat, it's gonna be a very, very tough matchup against the Boston Celtics, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Chicago Bulls, I'm not too sure what the offseason looks like for them. For the last couple of years, I've been preaching for them to have an identity or for them to have an idea of what they want to look like as a team going forward. But DeMar DeRozan, I'm not too sure how much time he has left on his contract. I believe he might be a free agent this upcoming summer. Nikola Vucevic got it back from these guys last summer, and Kobe White is sticking around for the foreseeable future. And so, as just like the Golden State Warriors, but to a lesser degree, the Chicago Bulls will have a lot of questions that need to be answered coming out of this offseason if they want to be able to compete in the Eastern Conference. Because not too long ago, these guys were the number one seed in the East for a little bit. And everything else since that day, since that time, has gone to shit. They've been in the play-in tournament twice. But let's go ahead and jump right into the very last play-in game. We got the Sacramento Kings, who beat the Golden State Warriors to earn themselves another shot at the 8th seed. Went on the road to play the New Orleans Pelicans without Zion Williamson in this game, and they still came up short. The Pelicans were able to beat these guys 105-98, sweeping the Sacramento Kings this entire season with a record of 6-0. These guys just have their number.
Yeah, I mean, just complete dominance from one team over the other. Like the Kings just haven't been able to them all season long, and the Pelicans' depth really showed up in this game. You got contributions from Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas, Najee Marshall, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Trey Murphy. A bunch of contributions from a bunch of their guys, and that's going to be critical in that first round matchup against OKC. And on the Kings side, I mean, De'Aaron Fox did all he could. Personally, I've been a bit critical of how De'Aaron Fox has approached his game all year long, but even then, I think he played a good game. But overall, I mean, the Kings, this is kind of the issue that we went back to early on in the season, or before the season even started, about them not really making any moves, not really making any additions. Last offseason they had a splash with getting Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter, and then from there they didn't really improve that much. They re-signed Harrison Barnes, they drafted a couple rookies, but they didn't really improve that much, and it kind of showed up this season. They would have had to replicate that historic offense because their defense obviously wasn't good. And from there, I mean, it's just the team just kind of remains stationary to me. And Malik Monk's on expiring, and it's just a question mark of what are they going to do next to kind of fill that void. They really desperately need a wing or another scorer because Sabonis as your second option or De'Aaron Fox being your number one just isn't going to be a viable way to compete at the highest level. So for the Kings, I mean, they just need to improve in that aspect of who's going to be their number one, number two kind of guy, who's going to blend in that gap of scoring, and it's going to be a question mark for them going into the offseason.
Good overall performance by the Pelicans. After losing to the Lakers and losing their best player, Zion Williamson, they came back and they punched the Kings in the mouth. They came out shooting. They came out playing phenomenal. They came out energetic. The defense was there. Offensively, everybody was clicking and on point. And, they have a very deep roster, and that shows when, they start clicking and everybody starts performing. Ingram played good. Jonas, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado.
Hold on. I need you to show a little bit more love to the guy that's not better than Jaylen Brown, supposedly, right? The guy that's the guy that's not better than JB, right? You said that not too long ago.
No. You really, it's not even close. JB's twice as better.
You put JB with this roster, he's not making the postseason with these guys, man. But I'll let you carry on.
Shut up with that. But great way to bounce back from that game without Zion. And for the Kings, like Abdi mentioned, they played great, not great this year, but they were not going to replicate what they did last year, and they really didn't go into the offseason to stack up and shore up, on their needs, or they could have been greedy and get, another superstar to pair to Fox and Sabonis, make a little trio right there. Somebody that can fit in, somebody that can be another great option to score. And, tonight they're missing out on guys like Malik Monk, especially him coming off the bench, him being that electric guy coming off the bench and that scorer that he is. They were missing that tonight, but, they got to go into the offseason and they got to see what they can do. I really don't think Sabonis as your second scoring option is going to work for you. I feel like Sabonis is more of a third guy. I feel like, he can perform as a third star on the team, but him being the second option as a scoring option, it's not well. So I feel like they got to go into the offseason, look for, maybe a guy like Levine that can come in and be that second scoring option for them and just build off what they have right now. But we'll see what happens. And for the Pelicans, they got to dance with OKC. Zion might not be ready and prepared, but it's going to be a fun little matchup.
Yeah, for the Sacramento Kings, it was pretty clear and pretty evident that they needed a guy like Malik Monk out there. And when you look at the bench points, they finished with 12 bench points to the New Orleans Pelicans is 34 bench points. And so it's just tough to compete there. Malik Monk is a guy that's looking to get paid this upcoming offseason, and I believe he will get paid. Just looking at how the Sacramento Kings operated without him. And this game, even though the scoreboard says 98-105, it wasn't as close as the scoreboard shows. The New Orleans Pelicans had control from this game pretty much from start to finish. Like Abdi mentioned, a lot of players contributed to this win. And their head coach took the training wheels and the minutes restriction off Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram tonight finished with 37 points, and he really found his groove. He really settled in that second half, finishing the game with 24, 6, and 6. And he pretty much closed out this team in the fourth quarter as well. It was just a very great team effort, team win without their leader, without their guy, Zion Williamson. But outside of CJ McCollum, everybody else did their job. That's Herb Jones, you don't expect much offensively, but defensively he's going to give you all NBA product. But CJ McCollum, man, that guy is just a 2-pack of ass. And for him to always talk shit about Zion and talking about getting prepared mentally and get your health right and get your diet right, you're doing all those things, man. Take your own advice and go out there and contribute and help your team. This game probably could have ended out. They probably could have been in a different position if this guy just stepped up and did his job. But for playing games, this guy doesn't show up. I don't expect him to show up in this upcoming matchup they have with the Oklahoma City Thunder, but we'll get to that in a bit. But overall, it's a good team win for the Pelicans. They earn themselves the right to play in the postseason. I just wish Zion Williamson could be healthy for this upcoming run, but it is what it is, man. Maybe if these guys are able to get out of the first round, which is going to be a very, very tough, then we might be able to see him then. But outside of that, that pretty much wraps up the play-in tournament.
Record a new hit, then we making us a film. Wouldn't sign a deal if I got a couple mil. Been in the lab, now they throwing out deals. Me and now Lakes, now that's overkill.